Well, hello, Sandy.
Amy, happy podcast day.
Happy podcast day and happy spring. It's lovely here in Kansas City, but you're getting a little weather, right?
It doesn't stop. And from what I hear, this is more typical for winters, and they've been very mild the last few years, which I remember being a kid and the winters were horrific. And then I'd see my kids going to school in shorts and,
Yeah.
hoodie. And it's like, you have no idea what a winter's like. So, Mother Nature will be Mother Nature, and she just wants
Mother-
snow this year. So,
Well, that's kind of fun. You know what? I always like the first snow and I always like the last snows.
mhm.
When I know like it's March and it's snowing, it's going to go away really fast. It's always, those are the ones I like. The ones in between. Eh,
And I would have
okay.
to tell you,
Like
the difference
survive.
here is people play in it so much. They
Yeah.
cross country ski, they downhill ski, they snowshoe. And so there's a different attitude.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, like everybody's excited. We're getting one more big dump before the end of the year. How exciting. And you
Yeah.
wouldn't hear that back in Iowa, right?
I know. Yeah. And out there you get to, oh yeah, we get to go play some more in the
Right.
snow.
My
That's good.
last run of the year.
Fabulous. That's fabulous. Okay. So today we're talking about differences
Mhm.
that make us, that scare us, that make us fear things that are make us uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of that stuff. So one of the things, I can't remember why this topic came about, but I'm thinking it had to do with us traveling because I know there were some things that were going on for me in New York City, walking by homeless people and that difference that I don't experience that all the time made me a little uncomfortable. And what's the best way to handle it? What do you say when they're asking for money? So it was just, I know that was part of the
Didn't
conversation.
you go to a networking event or something or am I making this up?
Yeah,
I am making it
you
up.
are
I
not,
could
you are
be.
not making it up. You are correct. Yes, there is a net. So I'll share that story too, because I will tell you now that I've moved, and
Mhm.
I don't know if this happened to you, but I am in a completely different environment.
Mhm.
When we lived in West Omaha, everybody looked very similar to us. There were a lot of faith communities, all very similar. There was just a lot of same out
Mhm.
there. And I remember my sister visiting one time and we went to the pool and she was like, "You all look alike in Omaha."
That's funny.
It was kind of funny. She's from the East Coast.
Mhm.
Anyway, so now that I'm in Kansas City, it's completely different. And the story that you just nudged me on is I was looking at networking groups, trying to find groups to connect with, to, reestablish myself. And one group that was in the urban Kansas City center was all Black females.
Okay.
Okay. And there was the same group was out in the suburbs and they were all white. Okay. And so
Interesting. Okay.
exactly, it was the same branded, but this group all Black, the one in the suburbs all white. And I'm closer to the one in the city. But I looked at that group of people and I felt conflicted because I was like, I don't know if I belong with that group. And it made me super aware of the flip of that, where, there's Black women all the time looking at groups of white women and not
Right.
feeling like they belong.
Right.
And I was part of those groups of white women saying, "Oh, come on, you're welcome." But now I get the feeling of seeing something like that.
When Garrett made the comment, you had mentioned travel. He had made the comment once we got to South America. He's done more than I have, but I haven't done any international travel where they didn't make English the primary language, meaning tourism. You go to Mexico,
Mhm.
anybody you confront, they make sure that it's known that they're conforming to me. South America was completely different. We were the second language, and we felt like the second language, and that's the way it should be. But it was a good
Right.
education. And Garrett made the comment, he said, I feel so little because we don't know the language, and we're trying to communicate, and they're looking at us like, you come here and you don't know the language. And now we know how people feel like when they come to America, and we say, oh, you don't
Yeah.
know, you don't speak English. Why do you come to our country and you don't speak English? And we did, we could walk in their shoes, right? And
Yeah.
it's very interesting when you do feel like the minority. And for much of the trip, we were, because we weren't, yes, we were fueling their economy, but they have plenty of other things going on. And we were just tourists that they didn't have to deal with. Right.
Right.
And so it was a,
It's a
would I say it made
different
me feel
perspective.
uncomfortable? It was a different perspective. And it
Yeah.
made me more on my game to try that. It was the burden was on me because I didn't have the basic understanding of the language. So that shifted the burden to me to be able to find ways of best communicating and um, making sure that we were able to communicate when we needed to. But it was a whole different feeling.
Right. Yeah. It's to I have often read that the norm of things are built around white men. And
Mhm.
so when we picture things, it's pictured with a white man in that place. And then everything is a different level of otherness.
Mhm.
And I heard that one time and I was like, isn't that interesting that this kind of the assumption that it's a white man and that, and then you go different degrees. I
That
thought that
is
was
very interesting.
one of the things that I follow a lot of people who do DEI. It's like a very strong interest of mine. And one of the ladies that I follow, her name's Tiffany Blassingame. She's also a professional organizer in the industry. So I know her. She does a lot of training on DEI and
Okay, I
she's
don't know what DEI is. I am so sorry.
oh, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Okay, I like it. I like
Yeah,
DEI,
and
but
that's
I just needed to know because
yeah.
I'm
See,
not
so
as schooled.
this is a lot of corporations are doing DEI
Okay.
initiatives, and they some of them will add the B, which is DEIB, which is also belonging. So it's helping people feel like they belong there. Um, anyway, Tiffany does a lot of this. One of the challenges that she put up one time was decolonizing your media. And which means decolonizing. If you think of the filter of all of our social media, all our movies, and all the stuff that we consume, a
Mhm.
lot of times it's through white men are filtering it and giving it back to us.
Okay.
Okay. So white men are the directors, producers, they are the writers of the books, they are the ones that are creating the content to give to everybody.
Not in this Oscar round.
Yeah, 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 right. Exactly. Not in this Oscar round. But her, so I started to notice the shows that I'm watching. And I started to notice I just started to notice the movies I watch, the rom-coms I watch, are typically two white people on Netflix.
Right.
Like I never even thought, I don't even think about it. And then so I started thinking about it. And I watched a movie on Netflix and it was based out of Africa, South Africa, I believe, or another country. It might have been I can't, it might have been Nigeria. I can't remember, but it was a African country and that was two successful women. And it was like a love rom-com and it was adorable. And I was like, all right, so this is like decolonizing what I'm watching all the time.
Mhm.
And it's an interesting perspective. I'll share another one is every once in a while I get to watch the Tamron Hall show. Do
Okay.
you ever watch that?
No.
Oh, she comes on after Good Morning America.
Okay.
So that's why occasionally the TV is still running while I'm over here working.
Okay.
Um, she spotlights Black artists. So she'll have Black actors on there, Black musicians. Today she did a whole thing on writers, people writing books, people I've never even heard of. And I'm just sitting there watching. I was like, I feel so out of the loop that I don't know any of these people.
And I found my love for indie movies, independent movies,
Yeah.
and film streams because they get a lot of, I'll tell you different countries. I am quite the pro and I love subtitled movies, which that would have been am I going to go through that effort unless it's excellent? And now it's a norm for me. But that really did culture me. And it was a bit of decolonization, right? Because
Right.
that became the norm, was not the white man, was a lot of foreign, Asian, African American, a lot of documentaries. But because of that, I don't understand pop culture, what's cool in pop culture. I don't have a TikTok account. And that's a different story. I was on for like one hot second and I got kicked off for a childhood video. I think somebody must have hacked my account. But
Oh,
anyway, I'm like, I'm not gonna mess with it. But I miss out on a lot of, I don't know who these people are. And I'll say, who
yeah.
are these people? But I'll tell you, Amy, that falls in line with back to feeling uncomfortable is I'm a little out of the loop on what's PC. What does PC stand for when the kids say, Mom, that isn't PC? You
Politically correct.
politically correct. Thank you. That isn't politically correct. You shouldn't be, that's a bad thing. And
Yeah.
I've become the old person that doesn't always understand what's PC anymore. Do not imitate accents.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
There.
But
Yes.
actors in my mind, again, I don't know. I did not know that was not PC. I've been made very clear by my two younger children, Mom, no, do not do that. And so, no, I'll leave that for actors and movies. But I'm finding things I feel uncomfortable going there in conversations sometimes because I'm afraid I'm going to offend people, not
Yeah.
meaning to, but because I'm not hip and with it to understand everything that's PC and not PC.
Completely.
Or are you
I,
more PC? Do your kids tell you that? Mom, that's not PC.
oh, yeah, they tell me, I will tell you, being part of NAPO and the leadership
Mhm.
of that association, um, I hear more of those conversations. There was a whole conversation in the NAPO group about the master bedroom because, people, a lot of us refer to it as the master bedroom.
Is that
Well, the
not
master,
PC?
no, because
Damn
it's
it. I
based
got that one
on
messed up too.
exact. Well, so most of us
Okay.
do because that master is based on slavery, the time of slavery. And the master of the house lived in the biggest bedroom.
Okay, so that's good because I thought it was masturbation. So that's good. That's you might have to cut this part out. Sorry. So the master slave. See, look at I am getting so schooled. I had no idea.
But so you're supposed to call it the primary suite. No, everybody's gonna be different with this. But I will tell you, sorry. I will tell you that I've noticed on HGTV, most of the TV shows
I
don't
didn't
call
say
it the
that.
master suite anymore. They call it the primary bedroom. And it's just these well, I'll tell you, understanding the history of phrases is a lot of understanding why it's not comfortable for everybody, that phrase.
So, okay, not trying to change the subject off of master, but you're like, probably should. Um, the use of pronouns instead of he or she.
Yes.
I feel uncomfortable, not because of somebody's binary association, but because I am so fearful I am going to mess up what I say. He, she, they, we, because how I was raised in the English language and how I was taught, they never goes with a singular person. And I'm a blabbering fool. I have listened to podcasts, I have read up on it, but Amy, I have a really hard time. So my discomfort is not because somebody doesn't choose to be what their gender was at birth. It's because I am so fearful because I have that I'm going to say the wrong thing, use the wrong pronoun, and I just am almost paralyzed in conversing.
You know, ditto. It's hard, but here's what I've learned. I have someone and that uses they them that I'm close to, and it's really hard. It's hard to get to that where you're using not he or she, it's they or them. But what I have found is I apologize. And
Okay.
I'm just like, you know what? I'm just completely transparent. I'm trying to use the correct pronouns. I just keep falling back on what I'm used to calling you. And so it's just a conversation that we continually have. And somebody actually told me to pretend they have someone on their shoulder.
Okay.
So it's like a hey.
And I think I love what
It
you're
doesn't help me.
saying because it's not good to ignore it. Because what good
No.
is having a conversation? And I'll tell you, it's not just they, because I have people that were clearly born he or she, but
Mhm.
they associate with the opposite sex. And so I
Right.
will just say, we'll be having a conversation and I will be calling she, he. And, so far I haven't been, I think the person who feels the worst is myself because, because I'm not called on it and I think about it later, it's like, did I say that?
Yeah.
The trick I've done in my mind is just think before I talk, and I'll tell myself she in my mind, they, he. Just like repeating a name. Think about like when you meet somebody and you're like, I don't want to forget their name. Amy, Mamie, Lamey, whatever in my mind to make sure I don't offend somebody by forgetting their name or saying the wrong name, right? So
Right. But what do you do if you do forget their name?
ask them.
Ask them. Usually it's like, oh, I am so sorry. I've completely forgotten your name. The same. I think that's there's so much shame around us feeling like we have to be perfect in these situations. Like, oh no, I hurt their feelings or um but the more and more I'm uh, me personally, I'm open to understanding and knowing and fessing up when I screw up. It's like people with different faiths, I
Well, that's a great example.
understanding my old neighbors across the street from us, they were Jewish. And, Sally and I, we would meet on the street and we would talk. She was talking about cooking stuff for their celebration that they were having. And I knew nothing about the celebration or the holiday. So I was like, okay, so what's the holiday? Tell me about the holiday. What are you cooking? What are the traditions? And just kind of asking the questions instead of, because old me would have stood there and been like, I don't know what she's talking about. I'm just going to run.
Right.
I'm ashamed of myself that I don't know I don't understand this. So I'm out of here. Like, I'm just going to change the topic and move on instead of trying to get understanding of what is happening.
And it's when you are raised in a bubble, and I lived in a
Yeah.
small town, we had our variations of the bubble, but it was very Mayberry. And I am very grateful for people who have given me grace because they recognized that, it wasn't intentional. And I'm sure that wasn't their first rodeo. The example I love to give is they still have at my Rotary Club that I was in for 20 years. They had they started when they would send out whomever would take turns with the invocation. There was like a little line saying this needs to be interdenominational, blah, 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 because I was the person who decided when I was a 23-year-old as giving the invocation that I had everybody say the Our Father, and Rabbi Kripke was sitting in the front row. Oops.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I had no idea. And somebody pulled me aside. Well, I went to Catholic school. They didn't teach us about the Jewish religion.
Right.
I didn't
You thought
know. We
everybody
didn't
did the
even
Our
have
Father.
cable. I mean, how did I know these things? And actually, I think Rabbi Kripke almost got a case of the giggles. He thought it was the funniest thing ever that this girl, had
Yeah.
everybody say the Our Father together. And they said he doesn't have an our father is your father, it ain't his father. I think somebody said something like that to me, and they had to like literally explain it to me. And 15 years later, whenever somebody got an email saying you're the invocation, here's what not to do. I'm like, that's the Sandy Lane rule of I created what not to do. But he gave me grace. He laughed about it because
Yes.
it wasn't intentional. And at that point, it didn't even make me uncomfortable because I didn't know. I was apologetic after the fact and I learned. But how about, Amy, the people that do things to make you feel uncomfortable? Have you had
Right.
that happen before? People that
Well,
want to be so
yeah.
different that they want to provoke you and they want to see how you're going to respond. It's almost a taunting. It's the opposite of grace.
Well, and the flip side of that is the use of pronouns. When somebody says, they have this preference of a pronoun, and there's somebody who refuses to acknowledge that
Right.
and continues, it's that I don't know the right answer to that. I don't know. Like
I
when
keep my
people
mouth shut. I mean, I've had people that literally will be like, look at me. I'm super different. I'm going against the norms. And well, you got a problem with that? And in that case, because they're looking to pick a fight, I just don't say anything because what good will it do? Because I'm not egging it on. And again, I don't know what's going on in their lives. And I don't want to give specific examples because it could seem derogatory, but I have totally
right.
had it happen where it's been thrown in my face. And I truly feel like, and I observed them trying to get responses out of other people to pick up a debate, and
Yeah.
that people were lured in. And so diversity can be used as a negative if it is, it kind of gets back to drama, right? It's like a created drama to
Yeah.
to find acceptance in a backwards way, isn't it? I don't have that happen often, but I have definitely had that happen before.
I feel like I haven't had that happen in a really long time, but I do remember as a teenager feeling like there were definitely people trying to be a little bit more on the edge to get attention and to get, start things. I don't know that I've experienced that lately. I will tell you though, when I see the people disregarding pronouns, I usually don't confront them. I'm pretty clear on saying the correct pronouns, but I don't like say, I'm not like, shouldn't do that. You should be this. You
Right.
shouldn't, I'm not going to do that. But I do talk to the person who's the reciprocant of that. If it's just acknowledging, I saw that happening. Are you okay? Like it's just like a
Right.
basic, are you
Right.
okay? And making sure that they're okay with being disrespected, which
Right.
is a horrible thing to have to ask somebody. Are you okay
Right.
with being disrespected?
But it's back to the battles. There's some people that they either want to battle, they want to be heard. I can never understand people that have such strong opinions about somebody outside of themselves and what's acceptable. And if something is consensual and no one is harmed and you haven't
Right.
walked a day in their shoes, but then I'm also not
I,
going to debate it. This gets back to an older podcast that we had on should you stick up for everything, and you should only have conversations with people that are going to be open-minded and willing to have a conversation, and it should apply to you too, that you need to hear their side of it. Otherwise the conversation's worthless.
right, exactly. It's not worth just sharing opinions if you're
Right.
not gonna do anything with them, if you're
Right.
not going to open to changing your mind. And I will tell you, so the pronoun thing, I do think that some people are just oblivious. Like they don't realize that they're doing it, but some people are just intentional at not wanting to acknowledge it.
Right.
And I think the people who are unintentional and you know that they're not meaning it, sometimes it's worth having a conversation with them of, hey, did you know that you were doing that? And so, and see,
Right. Feel it out,
and
give the benefit of the doubt to start with, and then choose your battles wisely. Right.
yeah, it's hard though. Being all these differences are hard.
And they get harder as we get older because they might not be the same difference as we experienced at that age. I think this is the first time that I'm noticing more the generational differences. It was easier when I was in that middle, like in my 30s, because I wasn't that far away from being young. The parents, had kids that age, but as like now I'm evolving from not having kids in grade school. So things like when people venture their opinions about devices and, the child with the iPad at the restaurant, I can't relate to that because that wasn't something. And so I also don't offer an opinion. I'm always curious, like our travel friends, he's a psychologist with Boys Town. I love to hear his perspective because he's dealing with it. And but I'm so far evolved from it that
yeah,
there's a
completely.
lot more variations to life than I've ever been that I've been exposed to in the past, or I'm further away from it.
Yes, I'm with you on that. I have noticed that my children, and I just hit the table. Hopefully that wasn't too loud. So I'm like, oh, my children are very receptive to all of the differences in people. It's very interesting to me
Mhm.
how accepting they are of everybody. And I say that from what I see. I don't see them all the time, obviously, but just the conversations we have, I am always learning from that generation of how to be accepting and how to be welcoming to all types of individuals.
And I would agree with that. And I'd say especially my youngest, and he gets so confused, like back when people are, white versus black, he's like, gosh, everybody's a little bit of something. I mean,
Right.
he's never said this, but I think he sees certain things as old white men problem. Because they see the world differently. And I'm saying that because we're talking about that colony,
Well,
right?
and yeah,
And
yeah,
that they don't understand that his generation is a melting pot, and whether it's gender or race or religious, they don't see that generation is much more aligned with not categorizing people and having people be themselves and so many broad categories. And I think the older generation, we spent a lifetime checking the box. Are you number one, two, or
yeah,
three? Now maybe there's five, right? A or
right,
B, A, B, C, or D. And you know what the comment that I hear is, why do you even need the box? Because we're like, oh, this has gotten so confusing. There's now 10 choices for gender or race. And the comment he made to me is, well, why do they even need that box anyway? Why are they even asking? Where does
right,
that go?
right.
Good question.
Good question. I will tell you, being on the flip side of that, when we started, the association started doing their DEI work, they're like, well, what do we need to do? Like what's our base demographics and what are we trying to do with that? Like what's the change? So how do we measure it? What are the metrics? And so we started collecting data, trying to get, well, what are the metrics of who we are and what we are? Well, Tiffany, thankfully, she's a very good consultant. She told me because we're like, okay, only like 200 people filled in the thing. So it doesn't really represent the association. And because that's like 5% of the
Right.
association. I'm like,
Right.
that doesn't help. So she told us, she was very helpful because I'm like, I feel bad because I don't know what to do. I don't know which way to go, what to measure to identify if we're making any progress. Or, she said, start measuring your efforts, not the results, because the results are hard to measure with DEI efforts. But measuring your efforts, you're like, okay, we're trying this, we're doing this, we're doing this. And I was like, oh, that makes me
Oh,
feel
that's
so much
great.
better
Right.
just to know that, okay, if you're doing something, at least you're doing something and you're
Right.
not like just trying to reach a number.
Right. That's
Yeah,
great.
it was very helpful. All right, so we should probably wrap this up. What is the real and the ideal in this?
Well, the real is we live in a very diverse world. And whether we want to categorize or not, we're all different. And even if we grew up in a bubble, the world is much greater than that. And we're going to be by people that are different than us. And
Right.
it's up to us
Uh,
to choose how we're going to respond to it.
yes. And I would say the ideal, because you kind of did a little bit of ideal in there
I think
too
I always
about,
do that, don't I?
I
Yeah.
know they kind of get blended. I would say the ideal is making sure that you are making other people feel like they belong in a space. And even, and this is me talking to myself, when I don't see myself as part of a space, to go ahead and lean in and try to learn from that and explore it and see if I do can be part of that space and
Nice. I like
have some
that.
diversity. Yeah, it's hard. So I am going to recommend, I saw an interview with Ari Shapiro,
Okay.
who he's an PR journalist, and he just wrote a book. And I'm getting ready. I think I'm going to order it. It sounded very interesting, but he said something about things that differentiate us because are actually things that make us more valuable, more interesting, and makes the world richer,
Mm,
which I thought was very, very like, I love that. But the story is The Best Strangers in the World, Stories from a Life Spent Listening, because
okay.
he's just a journalist who's been traveling the world. So I'm gonna like check out the
Okay.
book.
All right. Let us know. That sounds awesome.
All right. Well, thank you, Sandy. We'll talk next time.
Bye, Amy.
Bye.